Ready, gang?
Ready.
Good evening, everyone. This is the Committee of the Whole meeting of the DeKalb City Council, May 29, 2018. Roll call, please.
Jacobson, Fanouken,
Here.
Marquardt,
Here.
Fagan,
Here.
Noriko,
Here.
Verbic,
Here.
Favor,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
7 present.
We're being served tonight by Deputy City Clerk Ruth Scott. And Ruth, I take it no one has filled out any speaker request forms?
No, not yet.
They have not, but I would remind anyone, if you would like to do that, please fill one out, give it to Ruth Scott over here. She'll get it up to me and we'll get you on. There are no items tonight on our Committee of the Whole meeting that are on the regular agenda. In public participation, no one has indicated a desire to speak at this time. We have one consideration for our Committee of the Whole meeting this afternoon or tonight. It's the review of property condemnation procedures and notice. And I'd like to call upon our Community Development Director, Jo Ellen Charlton, who will speak to this item. Jo Ellen.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The purpose of our discussion tonight is to update the Council and the citizens on procedures and notices that we both have in place already or that we're putting in place as a result of comments and concerns discussed at a Council meeting following a recent condemnation case in the community. We heard the concerns and at the request of the Council, we have prepared these written documentation policies and protocols in place and to be followed for future condemnations. Specifically, I think everyone agreed that there needed to be better notice provisions, particularly to residents residing within a condemned building. So in the case of the last condemnation that we had, we provided notice to the owners and had conversations and we're keeping them up to date. But through the course of the weekend, what we failed to do, and again, this is not in code, but what we figured out that we needed to do was to keep the residents informed because they didn't have the information about what was happening in the building, how long it was going to be, and rather than rely solely on the property owners, it is in our best interest to come up with some notice provisions to keep everybody informed along the way. To be specific, none of the information that I'm presenting tonight, this isn't a code amendment. We're not amending any codes. The codes are in place. They have been in place since January of last year. Instead, what we're sharing are the procedural outlines that include, again, both the things that we already do in practice and sharing that so you and the rest of the community have an understanding of the steps that we go through when there's a condemnation. And also those additional things that we think we should be doing or that we could be doing. So this is a living, breathing document that can continue to be modified as things change or as we get a new case that maybe we haven't had in the past. We can continue to look at things and take comments from the public and continue to modify these procedures. The basis for the document, as I said, is in the code, and they can and likely will be modified in the future to adjust for various scenarios. The procedure, so we had a few attachments in the staff report. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I really want to get feedback from the council and any community. But the procedures themselves, again, process we follow to comply with our code that's on the book. It was listed on pages 1 through 4 of Exhibit 1. And that just kind of went through steps in various scenarios that we follow. Page 5 of Exhibit 1 includes a relocation plan. Again, this plan is already highly utilized by both the police and fire department when they follow up to emergency situations, cars that run into buildings, fires, natural disasters. What might not be as in place as it has been in the past would be a follow-up to a pure condemnation for lack of a safe building. We can go through all of those steps that are already in place, but at the end of the day, we may not have some place for a family or an individual to go. We have the protocols in place, but there could be an instance, and we had a case, not in the most recent one, but a former case, where we went through all those protocols and there was no place for the individuals to go. In that case, we had put people up in a hotel room for a few days until some of the issues were taken care of. In that case, that was something that wasn't included in any department's budget, so we needed to find funds for those. So I think moving forward and having this in place will give us an opportunity through our budget process to come back to the council, and what we will be proposing is that we list an item on there. If we use it and need it, it's there. If we don't, it just is money that doesn't get spent. Mayor, did you have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned this was a living, breathing document. I got out of breath trying to get through it. I really did. It is so lengthy, and I hope folks who have a real interest in this have gone to the website and have pulled down the PDF on the document. My question of you that I think might be interesting to folks who are reading this or have read it, how much of this is new? How much of what we saw and what you sent out as background information is new to what perhaps we had been doing before?
We've never written down the policies and procedures before, so I think that's new. We just, go through the course of our jobs implementing those policies. So the notice provisions to tenants, that's new. We've not done that in the past. So as a result of that, we've created a form that's also in the packet to allow us to keep track of residents. So if we encounter a resident when we're on site, we're going to make every effort to capture that information. Who are they? What's their address? What's their contact information when they're not at home? How many people live in the building? Do they have pets? Ultimately, we need to be equipped with the right information so that if the building is closed and sealed, we want to make sure there's nobody left, people, pets, anything else in the building. So it also gives us the documentation we need to keep them up to date. So we're going to have a couple of resources. Obviously, the phone numbers will be a resource, but we're also proposing to have a landing site on our city website that would provide some place for people to go to get updated information about a specific case. We did outline a frequently asked question thing that we also propose to have on that website all the time. And as we get more questions, we'll probably add to that. But what I foresee is something similar to what we do in our planning and zoning cases. We'll list an address or a case or whatever's happening, and that way any resident can go to that location and get updated information. So if they had these 3 things to take care of in order to lift the condemnation on a delayed condemnation by a certain date, we could say, this one's taken care of, this one's almost done, and this one is planned to be done. We expect, the issue to be resolved. Or, owner can't get the right type of engineer on site to give us the report that we need until Tuesday of next week. So we can include that information and use that to keep everybody.
Well, I commend this city council. I commend those folks in our community who have asked questions. I commend our staff for coming up with these bullet points, if you will, in this document. I think it's proof positive that we as a city council have a responsibility to ask questions. You as a staff have a responsibility to follow to the best of your ability what policy this council might set up. But more important perhaps than that is our response to the public. So it's just something I wanted to say.
Thank you. So your question kind of led me through the other items that I was going to discuss. So, at this point, I'm happy to answer any additional questions the council has.
Alderman Noriko.
I, too, applaud the department's efforts to be responsive to concerns due to the recent incident. The question I have is, Joanne Rouse is indicated as a contact for a couple of issues. As I recall, housing specifically. But she only works part-time. And so are there provisions, could it be included in the document, her name or her title or designee or who the other person might be?
We did list Joanne's name, as you might recall, in the last budget session. you voted to increase her part-time position to full-time using money from the CDBG block grant funding. That has taken a little bit longer to put into place, and as of June 10th, she will be joining us
Oh, okay.
full-time.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we are
Very
comfortable,
good.
and she's kind of uniquely qualified because she knows all of the access to all of the housing resources and has all of those contacts and has oftentimes communicated with many people in residential situations.
Okay, very good.
And Kate, if I may add, just for the council's information, whenever a staff member, either full-time or part-time, is out of the office, they put an out-of-office message on their Outlook email account with the phone number of someone who can be reached in their
Okay.
absence, as
Okay.
well as on their voicemail. So even if she were remaining part-time, she would indicate, in my absence, here is who you can contact,
Okay.
and it may be any member that would be appropriate within the Community Development Department. So that's a practice we already have in place.
Okay, good. And then in terms of contacting tenants, is there a provision for contacting the landlord, who I would assume would have a log or directory of his tenants' phone numbers? Because at least as I was reading the document, the impression I got was that often it's difficult to contact tenants.
We don't have any tenant listing. We do have, as you mentioned, the owner listings for a lot of our, a lot of the properties in the community, either through our crime-free housing or some of our other inspectional programs. Fire department keeps emergency contact information. So, sometimes we need to verify who the legal owner of record is, and we have a couple of provisions in here that state that our intent is to provide to the owner. But if the owner is out of town, we do defer to recognized managers or other people that the ownership might be contracting with. So we will try to communicate first with the owner, then to a follow-up resident or a follow-up manager for the property. The management company should have
Yeah,
listings
well, yeah,
of all
that
of
was
the
my point,
residents.
yeah.
And sometimes we can get to those pretty quickly, and sometimes we can't. If it's an owner that we're in touch with, and they're here, and they have access to their records, that might be easy. Sometimes they're out-of-town owners, or maybe they're in-town owners, but they're on vacation, and we just need to have another way to track residents if we can't get easy access to that information. So between the owners, this list, and an ability for people to write into a website and leave contact information for the city and provide that
Yeah, I
that
think that was
contact
a good
information.
idea.
That's about all we could think to really, collect that data, but certainly open to other suggestions.
Well, and I guess not having been exposed to this kind of issue before, I was, somewhat surprised that it would be so difficult, but, it makes sense, so, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from council? Can I take it then that hearing none, I don't know if you have anything else, Joellen?
Again, this doesn't require a vote. These are, things that we can do. We're just advising you and the community, certainly willing to accept more feedback as we move along. This can be further modified as we continue to make improvements to our process.
Okay, may I assume then, from the lack of questions and the fact that this is quite a lengthy, substantive report, that there is consensus on the city council that this addresses most of the concerns that we heard during recent condemnation proceedings, and whether or not, and that we are fairly comfortable going forward with the implementation of this. One thing I thought of while you were explaining this, you're talking about landlords that were gone. I think that happened with Lord Stanley's. I think Mark Thompson, if I recall, was in Florida when this happened. And whether or not we had access then to his tenants, I don't know. But it would be interesting, I think, to take these points in this document and sit down with some of those folks who were impacted and say, you know, had we done this, had this been in place when this happened, would things have worked out better? Would you have felt more comfortable with it? I mean, nobody would have said, oh, well, you know, I mean, they were still asked to leave their apartments. But would the process have been any better? Any comments or, yeah, Michael, Marquardt, out on the Marquardt?
Just like anything, the whole key to this is communication. And that goes for anything that you're doing. So anything that enhances the ability to communicate with people and give them information and to get information so that you can cut down on the miscommunication and everybody knows what's going on. That's the key.
You're absolutely right, because
And
I
if-
think the one thing I've heard more, you know, not just about this, but about everything in our department and in the city is, if I only had a list, if I only knew what it was you were trying to enforce or that I was required to abide by, I would be happy to comply with the code.
Right.
So putting this on our website and giving people kind of that list to go and have that check off, I think is a good thing.
Yeah. Any other comments? Questions, concerns? If not, thank you, Joellen.
Thank you.
Unless there is a desire on the part of any of our city council members to recess for executive session of the city council, I will call for a motion to adjourn this meeting of the Committee of the Whole.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned from the Committee of the Whole. Our city council meeting will begin promptly at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Go get Jason. Yep. To speak briefly to the opportunity zone for Anglet North.